Welcome back to another episode of the PBMEdia Podcast.
Today we're joined with a very special guest, Dr. Meena Archie.
Yes, and Dr. Meena Archie serves at St. Joseph's Hospital.
Oh, I used to. And by the way, you can just call me Meena Archie. Totally fine. I used to work at St. Joseph's Hospital. I work now at Harbor UCLA.
And not only is he changing lives in the operating room, but he's also changing lives in the way he lives through humility and purpose and faith. And we're very inspired by him.
And Dr. Meena Archie is actually a great inspiration for us as we are youth that are thinking of pursuing a career in healthcare. And he's a very great example of a God-fearing man who was able to balance out his family life with his professional life.
Yes, Doctor, if you could please introduce yourself.
Thank you. I don't think I deserve all those kind words, first of all. But thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to discuss with you and talk with you about these pertinent points that you guys want to discuss. But yeah, like they said, my name is Meena Archie. I'm from Torrance, California, born and raised. I've been here all my life and went to St. Abraham my whole life. And so it has a very special place in my heart. And you youth, the youth of St. Abraham, also have a special place in my heart. So I'm happy to be here with you guys.
We're very excited to have you.
Thanks.
So starting off, how did you know that medicine was right for you? How did God guide you to that?
It always starts with a little push. So when we were growing up, we always looked at different career paths, and medicine was obviously one that was always sort of pushed or introduced early on because it's a good path. It's a good career. And I don't mean that from an economic or a financial standpoint. I mean that from the standpoint of helping patients out, helping people, being able to control your life to some degree, not a lot, but a decent amount. And doing something that you're truly passionate about, because it's hard to do something for your entire life if you don't actually care about it, at least in my opinion. So that was how it began. I was actually always drawn more towards mathematics and sort of more logical thinking type of things. And so I actually shifted for a short period of time during college, thinking I might do something in that regard, perhaps in the physical sciences, astronomy, etc. But when I started to volunteer and shadow, perhaps like what you guys are doing now, I learned that I really enjoy it from a personal standpoint, making relationships with patients, helping them out, and learning about science.
You talked about like flexibility with time. Do you think that like now being a surgeon, it's kind of hard to balance out like going to church and your spiritual life with medicine, or how do you deal with that?
It definitely creates a challenge. So if I perhaps selected a different specialty in medicine and I had more freedom and flexibility on the weekends, I think that would make it easier to go to church. Although even a lot of specialties that are considered easier, you can still get sucked into working hard and getting consumed with your work and then end up not going to church. Or doing other things that are important to you. So I will warn you guys about that, regardless of what you pick. I know people in specialties or even in fields that are not even in medicine that still get consumed and then get pulled away from church. I wouldn't say that is so much of a factor now because I do have more flexibility over my time, but during training, certainly you don't. You're working for the hospital, you're working to learn also, and so you dedicate the majority of your time and your free time as well to working and studying so that you can learn.
Yeah.
Was there a specific moment that you knew that medicine was right for you?
I think you make up your mind probably at some point early in college, or perhaps even before that. And then as you go through it, you'll realize that medicine is a very broad field. I mean, you can do so many different things in medicine if you have different interests, right? So even I, who was interested more in sort of mathematics and physics, I picked the specialty of vascular surgery, which there's actually a lot of physics and mathematics involved in hemodynamics. And so that drew me to that field. If you were interested in something else like technology, for example, then there's a field called radiology where you look at images and you have to actually understand a fair amount of the physics that goes behind how those images are acquired so that you can understand what you're looking at. So the point is, in medicine itself, it's a very broad field, very broad discipline, and within it, so many sub-disciplines. So a particular moment, I wouldn't say so. I would say that I ultimately went down that path, and then in that path I had so many opportunities to change, make some micro changes as to where I was going to go and how I was going to proceed. And over time, it just evolved into what it is today.
Was there ever a moment where your faith was tested during school or work?
I think as a Coptic Christian, especially in Los Angeles, I would say our faith is tested, could be tested daily, and to a small degree, to a large degree. If you mean to the point where I was considering not ever being a Christian, no, I don't think I've ever gotten to that point. I also should say I've been blessed to not have, any tragedies in my life. But those are the things generally that test people, right? A sudden loss of a loved one, something happening in your job, your career, a chronic illness, things like that can really test someone and push them to their limits. Thank God I haven't had anything up until this point. I'm just turned 37, so I consider myself very blessed to not have something like that. But I'm very close to people that have. And I've seen them go through it and work through it, and thank God they've sort of come to the point where they've come back to God. They never really left God, but they had to work through that in a way that I was able to see. From that standpoint, I can say, that I've seen it happen, but I can't say that it's happened to me.
If you can share, what was like the hardest part in like your road, and what did you learn from that?
So in the road of training for medicine, when I was younger, I was very laser focused on studying, doing well, so that I can get to the point that I am in my career. And while I think that's important, I'm not saying that one shouldn't do that. While I think that's important, I think it's also important to look at your life holistically, right? In total, to make sure that other aspects of your life are not being ignored. And what I mean by that is, if obviously you have families, you have friends that you love and care for, you have to consider that. Actually, before that, you have the church and God, your relationship with God. And so I would say that perhaps in my past and even now, I struggle with being able to make sure that I'm not ignoring those aspects. It's becoming harder and harder, especially as you grow. You guys will see, have a family, you'll have a wife and children, God willing, and you'll see that challenge becomes harder and harder as you grow because the responsibilities expand. But it's certainly doable. You just have to keep it in the front of your mind. It has to be one of your main focuses in life. Yes, your career is going to be important. You don't want to be consumed with that. Uh, but you also don't want to ignore anything else, and you want to make sure that you give each part of your life the appropriate attention that it deserves so that you can get to the point where you want to be.
What about those people that struggle now with like the regular jobs that are, like say they're just working a regular job like in fast food, for example, to make some money, and they're like not showing up to church, and their excuse is like, oh, because I'm working or whatever. How do you like help somebody find that balance?
That's a great question. How to help someone else find the balance? Well, everyone is different, right? What's important to everyone may not be important to you, and so you have to consider what is important to that particular person if you have someone particular in mind. If it were me, I'm one of the worst people to ask, right? Because I struggle right now coming to church with all the responsibilities that I have. It's a choice that I've made it consciously. It's not something that I've drifted away from. I'm well aware of what I'm doing, and I'm doing it for a particular reason, which is to make sure that my kids grow up in the church and are close to church and love the church. I don't want them going to church. I don't want that to be something that they feel is forced, right? I want them to see us doing it and to do it together, at least now when they're really young. And obviously, I have to help out as well. I can't just have them running around in the back, making a lot of noise, wreaking havoc, and I'm in the front praying. Yes, it's important for me to pray. I realize that. But I think it's also, as a father, important for me to make sure that they are uh, doing what they should be doing at church, right? Not just playing with toys and running around, although sometimes that does have to happen. But for the most part, I want them to understand what it means to be at church. So I can only do that if I'm standing right next to them, right? And I'm specifically talking about Noah now, my son, because my hopes are that he will grow in the church and become a deacon as well, and learn the hymns and sort of grow just like you two have grown in the church. So that's my goal. And so it's tough to give you a specific answer as to what I would tell that person. If it's a temporary thing, like perhaps what I'm going through, then I'd say hopefully in the near future things will change and then we'll see you more often. If it's something of a chronic issue, if it's something that you don't think is going to change because it's a love for work or a love for money or a love for something else that should be less important, then that's something that you'll have to discuss, particularly with that person. Um, we hear about these things like the love for work and the love for money, and we recite them and we know they're wrong, and we grew up reciting that, right? But you never know when it's going to hit you. You know, the devil works in very creative ways where he'll just come from a certain angle that you weren't expecting, and he'll play with your mind. It's very easy to play with a man's mind, right? With humankind's mind. And so you got to be careful about that, and you have to watch out for it. And I ask myself every day, actually, is the devil trying to pull me away from church and then sort of hide it behind the excuse that I'm taking care of my kids or that I want Noah to grow up a certain way? And so just have it in the front of your mind, have it, be conscious about it, right? And I think if you're thinking about these things daily, then you won't necessarily fall into the trap of uh, just drifting away and becoming someone completely different.
Have you ever looked at medicine as like serving God, and has that played a role into you choosing it?
Absolutely, yeah. I do think that. I don't verbalize it to my patients, for example, because you also want to be respectful of everyone else around you and their beliefs. But inside of me, I am thinking about that, and I'm serving patients uh, while serving God. Even sometimes when I used to do this for every operation, and I should still do it for every operation, but certainly for the tough operations, I'll say a little prayer inside of myself for the patient and to make sure that, you know, things go well, and some things we can control, but some things we cannot. And so I do say a little prayer and make the sign of the cross in hopes of helping that patient out to the best of my ability.
When you're really busy like that, how does your prayer look like?
It's a very brief prayer inside of me. It's not even verbal or out loud, but basically it's along the lines of, you know, please God, help me serve this patient uh, to the best of my ability. And then I make the sign of the cross.
People dreaming to be in healthcare, like what would you say to them?
Oh boy, lots of things. So this is a huge topic, and I'm happy to dive into it to the amount that you guys would like to dive into it. So I'm a firm believer that God will reward you for your efforts. I really do believe in that. It's how I was raised, it's how Mark and I were raised, and it's how we carry on our life even to this day. Anything that you want to accomplish, and we'll talk about healthcare specifically, but I mean anything at all, your relationship with God, you as a Christian, uh, hymns, etc. The short way to say it is you get what you pay for, right? Or you get the uh, whatever efforts you put into it, you will receive or you will reap the harvest, right? Uh, and so I will say when it comes to healthcare, it's a long path and it takes hard work, but it's definitely, definitely doable. And that last part's the most important part. You guys grow up in a world now where there's a lot of information right at your fingertips, and we didn't necessarily have that when we were growing up. And so a lot of the times I would have these thoughts like I'm not good enough to be a doctor, or I'm not good enough to get into a particular school for undergrad or residency, right? That's for other people. That's not for us. And I'm here to tell you, and everyone watching, hopefully, that that is absolutely wrong. It's absolutely false. And it's perhaps good to have that concern so that you have something to fuel your ability to work hard, right? You need to be able to work hard. But it's absolutely false that you can't accomplish that. And I really mean that when I talk to students in your position, going through undergrad and medical school and studying for so many exams. I was just thinking the other day of how many exams we have to go through. And these exams are, 6, 8, 10-hour long exams. Can't even think of doing that today. But, obviously in our 20s and our late teens and 20s, we were doing that. It's doable, and you have to take baby steps.
Yeah.
Right? There's that secular parable. It's not a Christian parable, but the parable of the bricklayer, right? That lays the bricks. The bricklayer doesn't look at a huge brick wall uh, before he even starts and says, "How am I going to do this?" Yeah, they might have to make some measurements and whatnot, but they lay one brick at a time, and that's all they're focused on when they're laying that brick, right? I think you understand what I mean by that. You take baby steps. Focus on what you're doing right now. Be mindful of that for now. Yes, you have to worry about what the next step is, but for example, if you're an undergrad, focus on undergrad. Focus on getting good grades, right? It sounds basic, but that's all you really need to do. Focus on getting good grades and do some activities that you're interested in so that you can talk about them when you start applying to medical school or whatever graduate school. And then when you get to the graduate school step, you're done with undergrad, you don't have to think about that. But if you're thinking about undergrad and you're thinking, well, what medical school and then what residency and then what specialty am I going to do and what country do I want to do it in or what state, you'll get lost. And honestly, that's why most people give up. Focus on one thing. And then you can even subdivide that into categories, right? So if you're going through undergrad and you have your sciences and your non-science courses, if I remember correctly, that you have to take, you got your physics class and your chemistry, right? You can feel overwhelmed. So focus on one thing at a time. When I was studying, and I used to be so good at this, I'm not good at it anymore, but when I was studying in undergrad, I was very organized and I would do just a little bit every day. You guys won't believe this, but I've never in my life pulled an all-nighter. I don't even know what that is to study. The only all-nighters we did were Abu Ghalamsis. No all-nighters to study in the library until 6 in the morning. I mean, we used to have that week, I don't remember what it was called in undergrad, where students would literally camp out and be in the library with their sleeping bags, studying all night long. I would come to the library on one day and then the following day go to the same place and I'd see them in the same spot. Probably hadn't showered. Horrible, horrible situations. Um, that's not the way to do it. The way to do it is to take small bits every single day so that when you go back to review it the next day, it's actually a lot easier, right? It sort of compounds on itself. And information has a way of doing that. When you're studying, it can compound on itself. You take little bits of information every day for 1 or 2 hours, and then repeat it again the next day for the new topic. And right before you finish, you look at the old topic for 10 minutes, right? It's very quick. Before you know it, after a month, you know that topic pretty well, right? And it's a whole story that you're going through. It's not just one lecture or something like that. You eventually have to go through 30 lectures, right? But you understand the concept of all 30 lectures by the end of the month. Now, if you try to play around for 25 days, and then for the last 5 to 10 days, you try to cram those 30 lectures in, it's a lot harder. It doesn't go in the same way either. And you probably have learned this when it comes to basically anything in life. It's really small steps and consistent steps. It's that consistency that really makes the difference. So what would I say to people that want to go into healthcare? Take it one step at a time, but be very deliberate, be very consistent every single day. You have to make a decision every day of what you're going to do that day. And if studying is one of them, then you better make sure that you do the studying that you want to do and that you select an appropriate amount to study, right? Yes, you will have days where you have to do 6 to 10 hours of studying, but that shouldn't be the goal for most days. Your goal should be 1 to 2 hours, focus on what you need to get done, and then just make sure that you keep that up for 5, 6 days a week. And then I think that you'll get to where you need to be.
I think it's really important that you say we need to set small goals for ourselves every day, just because I think a lot of people around me, especially in undergrad, they're all focused on the end goal. And so they're all kind of just, oh, what if I can't get into a good med school? And so they're not focused on what's in front of them right now. They're not focused on those classes they're taking, trying to do trying to be successful in those classes so that they can, you know, be able to focus on those applications later on when it comes time. But I think a lot of them, they kind of just focus on like, oh, my grades aren't good enough for me to get in anywhere, and so they kind of just give up and they just try and focus on passing these classes, which I feel like is more detrimental to their future than if they just sit there and focus on what's in front of them.